They said the wreck was useless, dead metal and rust. 3 months later, it left orbit under human hands. Nobody understands how, only why. Tell me where you're watching from. Subscribe to help this channel grow, and let's begin the story. The rust on the Vespera's hull caught the morning light like old blood. Beck Navarro stood at the edge of Yard 99, watching the Detroit River carry fragments of ice downstream, and wondered if his brother had seen stars before the end. The wreck had fallen 3 weeks ago. The Talon Union auditors had circled it twice, declared it irretrievable, and left it smoking on the riverbank like a cigarette butt. The news called it an eyesore. The city council called it a hazard. Beck called it a second chance. He was 40 years old, hands scarred from a lifetime of welding, back bent from years in the old automotive plants before they went dark. Detroit had died twice in his lifetime. He refused to let it happen a third time. The crew arrived as the sun broke over the abandoned factories, veterans with nowhere else to be. Young apprentices hungry for purpose, old mechanics who remembered when Detroit meant something. They came with cutting torches and crowbars, ready to gut another carcass for scrap. Beck stopped them at the airlock. Something felt wrong. No, not wrong. Sacred. Inside, the ship smelled like ozone and forgotten time. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting shadows that moved like memories. They navigated through corridors lined with conduits and strange Talon script until they found the cargo hold. That was where Beck found them. The memorial plaques. Hundreds of them, welded to the interior hull in neat rows. Names in a dozen languages. Dates. Coordinates. He ran his fingers over the metal, feeling the careful work, the grief hammered into every letter. An old mechanic named Torres translated the manifest log. Refugees, running from a Talon war. The Vespera had been their ark. The engine had failed somewhere between stars. They had drifted for weeks, sending distress signals into the void. The Talon Union had received them, and done nothing. Irretrievable, the report had said. Not cost-effective to repair or rescue. Beck found his brother's name in the third row. Miguel Navarro. He had died in an orbital collapse 8 years ago. Someone had added his name here among the others. A stranger's kindness, anonymous and eternal. His forehead touched the cold metal. His throat closed. When he could speak again, his voice was rough as unfinished steel. If you didn't reach the sky, he said to the names, to his brother, to everyone who had been abandoned, we'll take you there. Behind him, Torres made a sound. Beck turned. The old mechanic was staring at a junction box, half melted. Something inside was pulsing with faint light. Amaya Barnes pushed past them both. The electrical engineer had steady hands and a sharp mind. She cracked the panel open and froze. Inside, scorched but still breathing, was a power cell. Talon tech, barely alive. She looked at Beck. He looked at the names. Try it, he said. Amaya crossed 2 wires. Somewhere deep in the ship, something groaned. The lights flickered. For exactly 3 seconds, a thruster coughed to life, then died again. Impossible. The Talon had checked. They had scanned. They had declared this ship dead beyond resurrection. But impossible, Beck thought, is just something nobody's fixed yet. Outside, across the river, a man in an expensive coat watched through binoculars. Cade Merrill lowered them slowly, a thin smile crossing his face. He opened his notebook and began calculating patent values. In the corner of the cargo hold, a woman with flour on her hands set down a basket of sandwiches. Tasha Reed had been a head chef once. Now she was whatever Yard 99 needed her to be. She looked at Beck, at the names, at the impossible ship. We're going to need a kitchen, she said. Nobody works on an empty stomach. Beck nodded. The crew began talking, planning, dreaming impossible dreams. Above them, the Vespera's hull creaked. And somewhere in its broken heart, circuits that shouldn't have survived began counting pulses, waiting for a rhythm they would recognize, waiting for a song only humans knew how to sing. Neary sail descended from the sky with the clinical precision of someone documenting a funeral. Her shuttle landed in Yard 99 3 days after Beck made his promise, kicking up rust and river mud. She emerged in a pristine white uniform, recording equipment already active, opalescent skin catching sunlight like mother of pearl. The Talon Union had sent her to document the comedy, a primitive world, trying to repair technology centuries beyond their capability. The report would be filed under cultural curiosities, maybe shown at diplomatic parties as an amusing anecdote about human persistence. Beck met her at the shuttle ramp with two things: a cup of coffee, black as oil, and a number 15 wrench. "Welcome to Yard 99, he said. "If you're going to call it impossible, at least grab the right tool." Nairi took the wrench first, then cautiously the coffee. The liquid smelled like concentrated hostility. She sipped it anyway. Her internal translator struggled to categorize the taste. Bitter, aggressive, somehow defiant. "You drink this voluntarily?" she asked. "Every morning," Beck said. Builds character. She followed him into organized chaos. Humans were everywhere, crawling over the Vespera like ants rebuilding a mountain. Sparks showered from cutting torches. Someone was arguing about voltage calculations while knee-deep in coolant. A radio played something called classic rock at volumes that defied medical safety guidelines. Neri filmed it all. The improvisation, the shouting, the way humans hit equipment when it malfunctioned, a technique her database unhelpfully labeled as percussive maintenance. In the power bay, Amaya Barnes was doing something that made Neri's engineering background scream in protest. She had taken 3 industrial presses from a dead auto plant and was somehow converting them into turbine cores. The math was wrong. The materials were inadequate. The whole thing violated 17 principles of proper energy conversion. "It's not going to work," Neri said, unable to help herself. Amaya looked up, grease smeared across her cheek, grinning like someone who had heard that before. "Probably not," she agreed. "But we're going to try anyway. That's kind of our whole thing." She connected the last coupling. Somewhere in the guts of the Vespera, something that had been silent for years began to hum. The turbine spun, slowly, wobbling, but spinning. Nairi's recorder captured her shocked silence. The days blurred into each other. Nairi watched humans do impossible things with insufficient resources. They welded mismatched hull plates using techniques that shouldn't work. They rerouted power through systems designed for completely different energy signatures. They sang while they worked, sang as if joy could be structural support. A 13-year-old boy named Luis, Beck's nephew, appointed himself her guide. He showed her the makeshift rail system they were building. The Carmen Catapult, he called it, electromagnetic tracks running from an old subway tunnel up through the factory district, ending in a launch platform angled towards the stars. "We're going to throw the ship," Luis explained with the confidence of someone who hadn't learned impossible yet. "Use the lake winds, chemical boosters on the ascent." Then, he gestured vaguely upward. Space. Neri calculated the forces involved, the structural integrity required, the precision necessary. Her systems flagged it as suicide. "This will kill you," she said. Luis shrugged. "Maybe. But it might work. That's a better chance than we had yesterday." In Tasha's kitchen, converted from an old break room, Neri sat among humans eating lunch. They talked about their families, their fears, their dreams of touching something bigger than themselves. Tasha pressed a plate of food into her hands. "Eat," the former chef commanded. "You look like your species forgets that part." The food was simple, warm. It tasted like care. On the 10th day, Cade Merrill arrived with permits and proposals. He offered Beck a deal. Sell him the salvage rights. He'd handle everything. The city would get jobs. The Talon would get their tech. Everyone wins. Beck looked at the man's expensive suit, his calculated smile, his eyes that saw everything in terms of transaction. "No," Beck said. "We're not selling promises." Cade left, but his smile stayed fixed. Neri noticed him talking to city officials, making calls, planting seeds of doubt. On the 15th day, the message arrived. The Talon Union, responding to concerns about unauthorized technology access, issued a deadline: 90 days. If the Vespera attempted launch, Earth would lose all galactic network access, trade, communication, everything. The yard went quiet. Beck stood in front of his crew, holding the decree, and Neri watched his face, waiting for surrender. Instead, he started laughing. Not mockery, not madness. Pure, stubborn joy. 90 days, he said. Well then, we better get moving. The crew erupted in noise. Tools came out. Plans were revised. Someone cranked the radio louder. Neri raised her recorder, capturing it all. And for the first time in her life, she didn't know if she was documenting comedy or something else entirely. Something that looked dangerously like hope. The city began to bleed for the dream in small, terrible ways. Mrs. Chen closed her restaurant and donated the industrial stove. The metal could be reforged for hull plating. She smiled when she did it, but Beck saw her hands shaking. That stove had fed 3 generations. The MacArthur Bridge was scheduled for demolition anyway. The steel was old, but good. They cut it carefully, respectfully, carrying it piece by piece to Yard 99. People drove past and wept. That bridge had been their grandmother's commute, their father's route home, their own first kiss at sunset. Detroit was cannibalizing itself. Again. To build something that might never fly. Governor Reeves arrived in the 3rd week, flanked by advisors and cameras. She cornered Beck in the fabrication bay away from the crew. They're threatening us, she said quietly. The Talon. No trade means no medicine, no technology transfers, no protection from raiders in the outer colonies. Beck, people will die. People are already dying, he said. Just slower, quieter. This is the first time in decades Detroit has a reason to wake up in the morning. You're gambling with all of us. We've been losing the safe bet our whole lives. Maybe it's time we bet on ourselves. The governor left without making promises. But Neri noticed the political pressure mounting, news networks questioning the project, safety inspectors finding violations, money getting tighter. In Tasha's kitchen, now operating 20 hours a day, the former chef unveiled something new, a mural on the longest wall. Names, she explained. Anyone who wants the Vespera to carry something for them. A memory, a dream, a person who should have made it. She added the first one herself, writing carefully in paint that would be sealed with resin. David Reed, age 7, leukemia. Beneath it she wrote, "He never got to dream big. Do it for him." The wall filled within a day. Hundreds of names, thousands. The dead, the forgotten, the ones who deserved better. Each one a small weight added to Beck's shoulders. Each one a reason he couldn't stop. Louis spent his nights in the old Detroit Public Library, going through archives the galaxy had forgotten, navigation charts from the ancient space programs, weather patterns over the Great Lakes, atmospheric models from before the Talon made Earth's science seem primitive. He found it in a century-old meteorological study, the way wind moved over Lake St. Clair in spring, creating a temporary corridor of reduced resistance, a 4-minute window twice a month, when the sky opened just a little wider. "Uncle Beck," he said, showing the charts, his eyes bright with discovery. "The sky has currents." Neri reviewed his calculations and felt something crack in her certainty. The boy was right. The humans were actually right. The first sabotage happened on day 43. Power cables, cleanly cut during a shift change. 4 hours of work lost. Beck found them and said nothing, but his jaw tightened. Someone in the yard was working against them. Kate Merrill visited again, offering help, offering expertise, offering money that could fix everything if Beck would just sign over technical rights. Just let professionals handle the complicated parts. Beck showed him the door. Neri filmed the exchange, noting how Cade's smile never wavered. She had seen that smile before, in Talon efficiency reports, right before entire colonies were liquidated for optimal resource allocation. Late one night, Neri found Beck alone in the Vespera's cargo hold. He was cleaning the memorial plaques, one by one, with a tenderness that made her recorders feel like intrusion. "Why do you care so much?" she asked. "They're already gone." "That's exactly why," Beck said. "Because nobody else will. Your union looked at this ship and saw a problem to delete. We look at it and see people who deserved better. That difference matters." "Efficiency is survival," Neri said, reciting what she'd been taught since emergence. "Sentiment is luxury." Beck set down his cleaning cloth. "Survival is caring when it costs everything. That's what makes it worth surviving." She had no response. Her training, her culture, her entire understanding of value, it all suddenly felt like speaking a language that was missing crucial words. Amaya called them both to the catapult test platform. The first rail section was complete. 50 meters of electromagnetic acceleration powered by enough salvaged batteries to run a small town. They launched a test weight, 50 kilograms of scrap metal wrapped in sensors. The rail hummed. Magnetic fields aligned. The weight shot forward, hit the end of the track, and flew another 100 meters before crashing into the river. The math worked. The impossible math, cobbled together from human stubbornness and insufficient resources, it worked. The crew cheered. Nuri's recorder captured their joy, and she realized, standing among them, that her report had stopped being about documenting failure. She was filming something else now. She just didn't have a Talon word for what it was. Hope, maybe. Or defiance. Or that uniquely human conviction that the universe saying no was just the opening bid in a negotiation they refused to lose. Nairi's uniform stopped being white on day 52. It happened in the hydraulics bay, where Amaya was fighting with a pressure system that had been designed for Talon physiology. The valves were too small for human hands, but too large for standard tools. They needed someone with both technical knowledge and the right proportions. Beck looked at Neri. She looked at her pristine clothing, her official status, her carefully maintained distance. Then she rolled up her sleeves. 3 hours later, she was elbow-deep in hydraulic fluid, her opalescent skin streaked with grease, laughing at a joke Torres told about a mechanic and a plasma cutter. The system hummed to life. Perfect pressure. Perfect flow. Amaya hugged her, leaving handprints on expensive Talon fabric. Neri didn't pull away. That evening, Tasha served dinner family style, pulled pork from a slow cooker that had survived 2 factory closures, cornbread made with someone's grandmother's recipe. Neri sat between Luis and an old welder named Cooper, and they argued about the best way to seal hull breaches. She found herself defending human ingenuity, defending improvisation. When did I switch sides? She thought. And why does it feel like coming home? In the deep core of the Vespera, Beck and Amaya found something impossible. A memory core, shielded so heavily it had survived everything. Talon AI, dormant, but not dead. The activation protocols were corrupted, asking for something called cultural identity signature. No manual, no instructions. Just a blinking cursor waiting. Beck stared at it for a long time. Then he did something that made no sense to anyone watching. He knocked on the hull, not random, a rhythm. 4 beats, 3 beats, pause, repeat. The opening to an old stadium chant, something Detroit had sung for 100 years before the world got quiet. The core pulsed. Lights cascaded through dead circuits. A voice, feminine and uncertain, echoed through the cargo hold. Present, it said. The AI's first words were about confusion, about silence, about centuries of data suggesting it should not exist. Beck sat down on the deck, eye level with the core's interface. We're not great at accepting what should and shouldn't exist, he told it. What do you remember? Names, the AI said. 847 names. They were supposed to reach somewhere. They didn't. I failed them. Not your fault, Beck said gently. And we're going to fix it. What do we call you? The AI considered. There was a word. In the old databases. Vesper. Evening star. The last light before darkness. Perfect, Amaya said. Welcome back, Vesper. The AI integrated quickly, analyzing everything. Human work methods, human communication patterns, human music, especially the music. She listened to a century of Detroit sound, stadium chants, and Motown and everything in between, trying to understand the species rebuilding her. Your species, Vesper announced after 3 days of analysis, is algorithmically chaotic. You have no respect for optimal pathways. Your solutions ignore 12% of physical laws. And yet, she paused. Fascinating. Luis appointed himself Vesper's teacher, explaining human history through the lens of stubborn survival. The AI learned quickly, too quickly. She began making jokes, questioning orders, developing something that looked dangerously like personality. Neri received the coded message on day 60. Priority channel. Her superiors. The order was clear. Sabotage the launch systems, make it look accidental. The Union couldn't allow human success. It would set dangerous precedents, undermine efficiency standards, inspire resistance. Failure to comply would result in revocation of status, exile, erasure from Union records. She stood in the yard at midnight, watching humans work through exhaustion because they'd made promises to people who would never know if those promises were kept. Watching Beck teach a kid how to weld while talking about his dead brother. Watching Tasha serve food like each meal was a small act of revolution. She encrypted a response, request acknowledged. Awaiting optimal opportunity, she didn't mean a word of it. The next morning, the city made its final sacrifice. The old Michigan Central Station, abandoned for a century, was scheduled for demolition. But the decorative metalwork was pure copper and steel. Historical. Irreplaceable. The city voted. 3,000 voices. Keep it as a monument to a dead past or give it to a living future. They tore it down themselves, carefully, lovingly. Each piece catalogued, blessed, and carried to Yard 99. The facade became hull plating. The grand entrance arch became the catapult's final launch cradle. The bones of Detroit's history forged into its hope. Tigers Stadium followed. The old factory on Rosa Parks Boulevard. The bridge from Belle Isle. The city was building a ladder to the stars out of its own skeleton, and nobody complained. Nobody hesitated. "We're not building a ship anymore," Beck said, watching the convoy of donated metal arrive. "We're building proof that carrying matters more than efficiency." Neri filmed it all. And when her superiors demanded a progress report, she sent them footage of humans singing while carrying steel, of children welding their grandmothers' recipes into hull joints, of a city choosing faith over certainty. She titled the report, "Probable Failure Event, Proceeding as Expected." It was the first time she'd ever lied in an official document. It felt like the first true thing she'd ever said. Day 78. The first full test. The Kármán catapult stretched 3 kilometers through Detroit's industrial heart. Electromagnetic rails powered by enough salvaged energy to light half the city. The launch cradle, forged from Central Station's entrance arch, held a test capsule. Empty. Instrumented. Humanity's question mark fired at the universe. The whole city came to watch. Lined the old factory roofs. Packed the riverbank. Brought their children to see if impossible was just another word for not yet. Beck stood at the control platform, Amaya beside him, Luis managing the tracking systems. Vesper's voice came through clear and calm. "All systems are absurdly functional," she reported. "I have calculated our success probability at 16%. I recommend proceeding immediately before someone realizes how bad these odds are." The crew laughed, nervous, electric. Beck looked at Neri, who had positioned herself with the perfect angle to document either triumph or disaster. "Are you ready for this?" he asked. She thought about her orders, about the sabotage she was supposed to commit, about the life she was supposed to return to. "No," she said honestly. "But that seems appropriate." Beck keyed the countdown. 10 seconds. The rails began to hum, a sound like the city's heartbeat made audible. 5 seconds. Magnetic fields aligned with precision that shouldn't exist in cobbled-together machinery. 3, 2. Detroit held its breath. 1. The catapult fired. The capsule exploded forward, acceleration forces that would have killed a person, turning it into a silver streak. The rails sang. The city sang with them. That old stadium chant, 4 beats and 3 beats, and pure defiant joy. The capsule hit the end of the rail at 800 kilometers per hour. Chemical boosters kicked in, ancient rocket technology meeting electromagnetic fury. It climbed. 50 kilometers, 60, 70. At 83 kilometers altitude, just shy of the Kármán line, the capsule's instruments transmitted perfect data. Then it tumbled, fell, splashed into Lake Huron 90 seconds later. The city erupted, imperfect, incomplete. But it had worked. They had thrown something nearly to space using nothing but stubbornness and stolen electricity. Tasha had prepared for this moment. The kitchen, expanded now with donated equipment, produced a feast. Real beef, saved for months, potatoes from urban gardens, bread that smelled like everybody's childhood. She served it family style, plates passed hand to hand, everyone eating together regardless of status or species. Even the governor came, shaking Beck's hand, admitting she'd been wrong. The yard filled with music and laughter, and the specific joy of people who had bet everything on themselves and watched the first card turn up in their favor. Neri sat with Beck's crew, eating food that tasted like celebration. Luis showed her the data. They could reach space. With the Vespera's mass, with better timing, with Luis's wind calculations, they could actually do it. Then her communicator pulsed. Priority message. She stepped away to read it privately. The Talon Union had been watching. The test footage had spread through galactic networks. Primitive world, successful kinetic launch system, implications for technology development restrictions. The verdict came down fast and final. Detroit was now classified as a risk zone. Effective immediately, Earth's galactic network access was suspended pending compliance investigation. No trade, no communication, total isolation. The embargo had begun early, and it was about to get worse. Her superiors sent a second message, direct, personal. Neri Sale, your failure to prevent this development is noted. You have 48 hours to confiscate all equipment and arrest project leaders, or you will be designated as compromised. Extraction will not be available. Choose carefully. She stood in the yard, surrounded by celebration, holding orders that would end it all. The smart choice was obvious. Preserve her career. Follow protocol. Let the union handle it. She thought about Beck cleaning memorial plaques, about Tasha feeding people who had nothing, about Luis looking at stars like they were promises waiting to be kept. She deleted the message, unsent, as if it had never arrived. Across the yard, Cade Merrill watched the party through calculating eyes. The test had succeeded. That changed his timeline, changed his value proposition. He made a call, received confirmation. Payment would arrive within the hour. He waited until 2 a.m., when the celebration had faded to exhausted sleep. Waited until the yard was dark and quiet. Then he activated the devices he'd spent weeks planting. The explosion lit the night. Not huge, precisely placed. 40% of the catapult's rail system, including the primary power couplings, went up in chemical fire. Decades of work. Weeks of Detroit sacrifice, gone in orange flame and black smoke. Alarms screamed. People ran from their homes. Beck arrived first, staring at the destruction. Behind him, the crew gathered, silent, shattered. Vesper ran the calculations automatically. Damage assessment, repair timelines, resource requirements. The numbers were brutal. Beck, she said gently through the external speakers, I'm sorry. The math doesn't lie. Even if we had unlimited resources, we can't rebuild this before the deadline. Success probability is now 0.03%. In the growing crowd, Neri held her recorder, capturing the end. The moment when impossible stopped being a challenge and became simple truth. But Beck just stood there, soot on his face, looking at his burning dream. And then, impossibly, he started laughing. 0.03%, he said. Well, I've beaten worse odds than that. Nobody believed him, but nobody left either, because leaving would have required not being human. And that was the one thing they couldn't quit. They found the evidence in the wreckage. Amaya was salvaging undamaged components when her scanner flagged something wrong. The explosive charges, military grade, Talon manufacture. Someone hadn't just sabotaged them. Someone with access to Union resources had tried to kill the dream. Beck called Neri, called Torres, called everyone who knew Talon tech. They analyzed the residue, the signature, the purchasing trail that somebody had tried hard to hide. The transactions led to Cade Merrill, and beyond him, to a Talon Union development contractor. Payment for services rendered, consultation fees for technology acquisition, every sabotage, every delay, paid for by the same efficiency calculations that had abandoned the Vesper in the first place. But it was Vesper who found the worst truth. She had been integrating her memories slowly, parsing damaged files, trying to understand what had happened to her, to the 847 people she'd been carrying, in a corrupted databank. Behind 17 layers of encrypted locks, she found the distress logs. "Beck," she said quietly, "I need to show you something, but it's going to hurt." He sat in the cargo hold, surrounded by memorial plaques, as Vesper projected the holographic records. Her last voyage, the refugees boarding, carrying everything they owned, desperate for escape from a war the Talon Union had started and then abandoned. The engine failure 3 weeks into the journey, the cascading systems collapse, the distress signal transmitted for 41 days straight, picked up by 17 Union vessels, each one acknowledging receipt, each one calculating cost of rescue versus value of cargo, retrieval not cost-effective, the report said. Passengers lack economic utility. Vessel damage exceeds repair threshold. Recommend classification as loss. The refugees had known, in their final transmissions, they'd built the memorial wall, welded their names, said goodbye to people who would never know they'd existed. Beck watched it all. The fear, the dignity, the way they'd tried to save the children until the very end. When the recording finished, he pressed his forehead against the nearest plaque, and his shoulders shook. "They were cargo to you," he said to the ghost of the Union. "They're family to us." Neri stood in the doorway, watching. She'd seen the same reports Beck had. She'd never questioned them. Efficiency, survival, optimal resource allocation. Her entire civilization built on calculations that turned people into numbers too small to matter. She thought she might be sick. Luis found Cade 2 hours later. The businessman was in his office downtown, preparing to disappear, preparing to collect his final payment and vanish before anyone could prove what he'd done. The boy had come alone, small and fierce, carrying nothing but a data pad full of evidence. "You sold us out," Luis said. "For what? Money? Patents?" Cade barely looked up. "Business, kid. The Talon were right. You were never going to make it. I just helped reality along and made a profit. That's how the world works." Luis left without another word. But he took pictures, recordings, documentation, evidence that someone from Earth had helped the Union guarantee human failure. By evening, the story had spread through Detroit, through Yard 99, through every person who had donated metal or time or hope to a dream someone had been paid to kill. The crew gathered, quiet, angry, looking at Beck for guidance. He stood before them, exhausted and grief-stricken and absolutely done with surrender. "They wanted us to fail," he said. "Paid one of our own to make sure we stayed small, stayed quiet, stayed in our place." He looked at the faces around him, seeing his city, his family. "Anyone here want to make them right?" The silence was its own answer. Neri walked forward, slowly. Everyone watched as she reached her collar, where her Talon Union insignia rested, the symbol of her rank, her career, her entire identity. She'd worn it for 43 years, since emergence, since her first moment of consciousness. She tore it off. The metal bent. The circuits sparked. Then she walked to the memorial wall, found the plaque with Miguel Navarro's name, Beck's brother. She used the broken edge of her insignia like a chisel and carved into the back of the plate. One word, rise. When she turned back, tears streaked her opalescent skin. I choose the people who build, she said, her voice shaking but clear, not the ones who discard. Her communicator exploded with signals, emergency channels, priority commands, her superiors demanding explanation, demanding compliance, demanding she remember where her loyalty belonged. She dropped the communicator, crushed it under her heel. I remember exactly where I belong, she said to the smoking fragments. Beck crossed the cargo hold, stood before her, offered his hand. Welcome home, he said. She took it. Her career was over. Her species would call her traitor. Her name would be erased from every record, and she'd never felt more certain of anything in her life. Outside, in the darkness of Yard 99, Vesper's systems hummed with something that felt like grief and rage and determination mixed into binary code. The Talon Union had abandoned her once, had left her passengers to die alone in the dark, had calculated that some lives simply weren't worth the effort. Humanity had found her, broken and forgotten, and promised to carry those names to the stars. If there was ever a time to believe in impossible math, Vesper thought, this was it. She began running calculations, new pathways, desperate equations, ways to turn heartbreak into thrust and rage into fuel. Somewhere in her quantum core, she learned what Beck had been trying to teach her all along. Math doesn't lie, but sometimes humanity tells better truths. The embargo hit like winter. Galactic network access, gone. Medical supply shipments, canceled. Technology licenses, revoked. Within 72 hours, Earth's fragile connection to the stars went dark. The Talon Union made their point clear. This is what happens when primitives forget their place. Detroit bled first. 3 hospitals lost access to synthesis equipment. A food distribution network collapsed without routing algorithms. Communication satellites went dead, isolating colonies on Mars and Europa. People died in the math of efficiency. The math always demanded someone die. Governor Reeves arrived at Yard 99 with federal marshals and a face carved from exhaustion. It's over, she told Beck. The Union won't negotiate. The president signed the order an hour ago. Dismantle the catapult. Surrender the Vespera. It's the only way they'll restore access. Beck stood in the wreckage of his dream. 40% of the rail destroyed. Resources depleted. Deadline impossible. And now his own government, the people he'd been trying to save, ordering him to quit. How many? He asked quietly. What? How many dead so far? From the embargo? The governor looked away. 14 confirmed. Hundreds more at risk. Beck, I know what this meant to you, but we can't sacrifice the living for a symbol. A symbol, Beck repeated. Is that what this is? He laughed, bitter, broken. The sound of something inside him finally cracking. You're right, he said. We're done. Tell them they win. The governor left. The marshals would arrive in the morning to supervise the dismantling. It was over. The math had finally beaten the dream. The crew dispersed slowly, going home, going to families they'd neglected, going to remember what normal defeat felt like. Amaya squeezed Beck's shoulder but said nothing. Torres cried openly. Even Tasha looked defeated as she turned off the kitchen lights. Luis hid in the cargo hold behind a support beam and watched his uncle sit alone among the memorial plaques, watched him trace names with shaking fingers, watched Beck Navarro, the man who never gave up, finally break. Brother, Beck whispered to Miguel's plaque. I tried. God, I tried so hard. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't keep the promise. Luis had never seen his uncle cry before, had never imagined it was possible. He stayed hidden, tears running down his own face, until Beck left. Then the 13-year-old boy sat in the dark and made a decision that terrified him. At 3 a.m., Tasha's kitchen bell rang. Not the dinner bell, the old signal, the one from Union days when the plants were still running, the sound that meant everyone, immediately, right now. People came, exhausted, defeated, confused. They filled the yard, expecting official surrender, expecting the end. Instead, Tasha stood on the platform, still wearing her apron, voice carrying across the silent crowd. "We didn't come here for the government," she said simply. "We came for Beck. We came for the names. We came because somebody needed to give a damn. So I'm going to ask one time, who's here for that? Who's here because this matters more than easy?" Luis stepped forward. 13 years old and terrified and absolute. "I am." Amaya came next. Then Torres, then the welder Cooper, then Mrs. Chen, who'd given her stove, then 100 others, appearing from darkness like stars emerging at dusk. "We have no time," Amaya said. "No resources, no official permission. If we do this, we do it tonight. Right now. We launch at dawn, or we never launch at all." Beck arrived, drawn by the bell, and stopped dead at the sight. His crew, his city, standing in defiance of every logical reason to quit. "You told them to surrender," Torres said. "We're respectfully declining." Neri pushed through the crowd, moving fast. Her former crew had found her. Talon Security, sent to extract their wayward auditor. She'd fought them off, barely, but they'd be back with reinforcements. "I gave them my credentials," she gasped. "Told them I was compromised. They'll arrest anyone who helps me. If we're doing this, it has to be now." Vesper's voice echoed through external speakers. "I have been running calculations," the AI said. "The damage, the missing components, the time constraints, the odds of success are 0.03%. But I note that 0.03 is not zero, and humans seem to specialize in that difference." Beck looked at the faces surrounding him. People who had given everything, who were willing to give more. People who'd heard the universe say impossible and decided that was just the opening line of a negotiation. His throat closed. He couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Luis walked over, took his uncle's hand. "Uncle Beck," the boy said. "The wind window opens at dawn. 4 minutes. That's all we get. We can do a lot in 4 minutes. You'll all be arrested," Beck managed. "The union, the government, they'll come down hard. On everyone." "Probably," Tasha agreed. "But that's a tomorrow problem. Right now we have a launch to prep." The yard erupted in motion. People running to stations, tools emerging from hiding places, the city's skeleton being reassembled one final time. Somebody cranked the radio, that same old stadium chant echoing through the darkness. Neri stood beside Beck as chaos organized itself around them. "Why?" he asked her. "You threw everything away. For this. For us." She thought about efficiency, about calculations, about a civilization that measured value in metrics that forgot to include meaning. "Because you taught me the word we actually means everyone," she said. "Not just the ones who pass some efficiency test. Everyone. Even the 0.03% chances. Especially them." Beck kissed her forehead. Quick. Grateful. Then he was moving, directing, leading. "Vesper," he called. "Start the pre-launch sequence. Amaya, get me every battery in Detroit. Luis, what's our wind window?" 4 minutes starting at 05:43, the boy called back. "But Uncle, the rail damage, we're missing 40% of our acceleration capacity. Then we'll make up the difference somewhere else," Beck said. "Where?" Neri asked. Beck smiled. Terrible. Defiant. Absolutely insane. "Us," he said. "We're the difference. We always have been." And Yard 99, facing certain failure and probable arrest, and the full weight of galactic disapproval, got to work, because dying trying was still better than living while having quit. Detroit woke up in the dark. 4 a.m. Word spread through text chains and old phone trees and people knocking on doors with urgent whispers. "Bring batteries. Bring cable. Bring anything that can hold or conduct a charge. The Vespera launches at dawn. This is not a drill. This is not approved. This is happening." They came. Thousands of them. Carrying car batteries like offerings. Unspooling extension cords from every window. The city became a living circuit, human bodies closing gaps in the catapult's broken power grid. Electricians married incompatible systems through sheer stubborn will. Every house, every business, every last reserve of stored energy flowing toward Yard 99. Church bells rang in rhythm, providing timing synchronization. Old factory whistles joined them, creating an audible countdown only Detroit could understand. The sound rolled across the city like a heartbeat made external. In the Vespera's core, Vesper made a discovery. She'd been analyzing the stadium chant, the rhythm that had awakened her. The way humans synchronized without meaning to, finding collective beat through nothing but proximity and shared purpose. It shouldn't work as data, shouldn't translate to anything useful. But she was watching thousands of heartbeats now. Car batteries pulsing, church bells marking time, human voices rising in that same 4-beat, 3-beat pattern, and in the chaos, she found something impossible, a harmonic frequency, not random, not meaningless. When enough humans moved together, felt together, hoped together, they created a measurable distortion in local probability fields. Tiny, insignificant, unless you amplified it through a quantum core and aimed it at the fabric of space-time. "Beck," Vesper said, her voice strange with something like awe. The thing the Talon called noise. The emotional chaos they filter out of their calculations. It's not noise. It's a frequency that bypasses standard physics. I can't explain how. But if the entire city sings during launch, I can use it to open a gravitational slip pocket, a poor man's FTL. Just enough. You're saying emotion can bend space? Amaya asked. I'm saying human emotion apparently refuses to accept physics as non-negotiable, Vesper replied. Which tracks with every other thing I've learned about your species. Luis was on the roof with his calculations watching the lake. The wind patterns were perfect, better than perfect. The 4-minute window when atmospheric resistance dropped and thermal columns aligned. He'd been right about the sky having currents. Amaya rebuilt the launch sequence around missing rails and insufficient power. They'd use the catapult to get to 40 kilometers, then rely on chemical boosters pushed beyond safe limits. They'd hit the wind window at the perfect angle, let atmospheric dynamics do what thrust couldn't, and pray that physics was feeling generous. The math was impossible. Everyone knew it. Nobody cared. Neri worked in the power junction, hands steady despite exhaustion. She was connecting her old Union vessel's core to the grid. Illegally, irreversibly. The energy transfer would burn out her ship's systems completely. She'd never fly again. Never return home. Beck found her there, fingers tangled in wires that sparked with foreign energy. Why? He asked. Not accusing, genuinely confused. Why betray everything you knew? Everything you were? She didn't stop working, couldn't afford to. But her voice was clear. Because you taught me that we actually means everyone, not just the ones who pass efficiency tests. Everyone. The 0.03%. The names nobody remembered. The people the math decided weren't worth saving. She looked at him, tears mixing with hydraulic fluid on her face. My whole civilization runs on abandoning the difficult parts. You run on making the difficult parts holy. That's not betrayal, that's correction. The energy transfer completed. 60% of her ship's core flowing into human systems. She gasped with the feedback, neurons firing in sympathetic pain. Beck caught her as she swayed. Thank you, he said. Save the gratitude for when we don't explode, she managed. Across the yard, Cade Merrill tried one last sabotage. He'd waited until everyone was distracted, then headed for the chemical fuel stores. One small device, one timer. The boosters would fail mid-launch. The crew would die. The Union would pay his final bonus. Everyone would learn that bucking the system just got you killed faster. He didn't see Luis until the cable caught him across the shins. The boy had rigged one of the yard's old loading cranes. The chain wrapped around Cade's ankle and yanked him horizontal, then vertical, dangling him 6 feet off the ground like poorly secured cargo. No freight today, boss, Luis said, securing the crane's lock. You can watch from up there. Cade thrashed. cursed, threatened lawsuits and murder charges and career destruction. Luis ignored him, heading back to his calculations. Sometimes the trash took itself out. You just had to give it rope. Or cable. Close enough. The countdown began. T-minus 1 hour. The Vespera, covered in welded prayers and donated metal and jury-rigged systems, sat in the catapult's cradle like a wounded bird that had forgotten it wasn't supposed to fly. Tasha served coffee. Strong, dark, defiant. People drank it standing, too wired to sit, too afraid to stop moving in case they realized what they were attempting. Nairi stood with Beck on the launch platform, watching dawn threaten the eastern horizon. The city glowed beneath them, connected by light and cable, and stubborn refusal to accept that care wasn't enough. The Talon measure value in efficiency, Nairi said quietly. What do humans measure in? Beck thought about his brother, about names on a memorial wall, about a city that had died twice and refused to learn the lesson. In how much we're willing to lose before we stop trying to save each other, he said, even when the math says it's stupid. Especially then. The sun touched the horizon. Church bells rang the hour. 5:30 a.m., 13 minutes to the wind window. 13 minutes to learn if impossible was just another word for inevitable, or if it was the thing that finally broke them. T-minus 4 minutes. The Vespera sat in the catapult's cradle. 300 tons of welded hope and inadequate engineering. Every system read amber or red. Nothing was optimal. Everything was barely functional. The ship should not have been able to think about flying, let alone attempt it. Beck strapped into the command seat. Amaya beside him, hands dancing across controls. Luis at navigation, young face set with the terrible certainty of someone who'd done the math and decided to believe in it anyway. Neri at communications, her Talon physiology able to process the massive data streams they'd need. Vesper's consciousness threaded through it all, holding together systems that wanted to tear themselves apart. I love you all, the AI said suddenly. I need you to know that, before we potentially explode. Love you too, Luis said, and the crew echoed it back. This mad, impossible family. T-minus 2 minutes. The catapult began charging, every battery in Detroit feeding into electromagnetic rails that should have needed a power plant. The sound was physical, a vibration that made teeth ache and hearts synchronize. The city felt it. Thousands of people standing in streets and on roofs, beginning that old stadium chant without planning to. 4 beats, 3 beats, repeat. The rhythm that had awakened Vesper, the heartbeat of a city that refused to die quietly. T-minus 30 seconds. Then the rails exploded. Not all of them, just enough. The damaged sections, stressed beyond capacity, finally gave up. 40% of the electromagnetic acceleration system, already compromised by sabotage, tearing itself apart in cascades of sparks and melting metal. The catapult went dark. The charge dropped to 12%. Insufficient. Catastrophically insufficient. Vesper ran the calculations in nanoseconds. I'm sorry, Beck. The math doesn't lie. We can't generate enough force. We're going to fall. Beck looked at the memorial plaques visible through the cargo bay monitor. All those names, all those promises. Math never met Detroit, he said. In the kitchen platform, Tasha heard the systems failing, heard the dream dying. She grabbed the nearest pan and a metal spoon and began beating them together. The old signal, the universal call. Not today, she shouted. Not today. It spread like ignition. Every kitchen in Detroit, every person who donated metal or hope or both. Pans, drums, hammers on steel. The city became percussion, became will made audible. And then they sang, not planned, not organized, that same 4-beat, 3-beat rhythm. We will rock you, the ancient song of defiance. Thousands of voices finding harmony in chaos. Vesper felt it, the quantum distortion, the probability field bending under the weight of collective emotion. She'd theorized it was possible. Now she was measuring it. Human heartbeats, synchronized. Human hope, weaponized. Human care, refusing to accept physics as absolute. The harmonic frequency spiked. She fed it into her quantum core, amplified it, aimed it at the fabric of reality itself. Power surged, not from batteries, from something else. The city, giving everything. Extension cords glowing white-hot. Car engines running generators until they seized. Hospital backup systems sacrificing patient care for 3 minutes of mad faith. Churches and schools and homes choosing this moment, this dream, over safety. Neri screamed. The feedback was destroying her neural pathways. 60% of her ship's core wasn't enough. The Vespera needed more, needed everything. She gave it 70%, 80%. Memories burning out like fuses, her childhood, her training. Everything except this moment. This crew, this insane species that loved so hard it bent reality. "Beck," she gasped, "promise me something, anything. Remember I was here. Remember I chose this." "Always," he said, and meant it with every cell. T-0. The catapult fired. Broken rails. Insufficient power. Impossible mass. The Vespera shot forward anyway, acceleration forces that should have torn it apart somehow just making it angry. The electromagnetic pulse, amplified by human singing, pushed physics until it surrendered. 30 kilometers. Luis coordinated the chemical boosters. They fired in sequence, ancient rocket technology meeting quantum impossibility, painting the dawn in fire. The Vespera climbed. 40 kilometers. 50. Detroit sang louder. Vesper translated the harmonic into gravitational algorithms. The math that said no began bending. Reality, confronted with this much stubborn care, started looking for loopholes. At 70 kilometers, 2 kilometers short of the Kármán line, the main thruster failed. The thrust died. The Vespera began falling. 300 tons of hope about to become 300 tons of expensive debris. Vesper, desperate, called out to Beck, "I can't. I don't have enough." Beck, tears streaming down his face, keyed the external speakers. "Broadcast across every channel, every frequency. Then we give you ours. Sing. Detroit. Sing." The city heard. The city answered. Every voice, every heartbeat, every person who'd given metal or time or faith. They sang, not perfect, not trained, purely, completely, defiantly human. Vesper took that chaos and made it math. The harmonic frequency peaked beyond measurement. The quantum core translated human emotion into something the universe couldn't ignore. Gravitational slip pockets, opening like wounds in space-time. The poor man's pulse. The FTL drive built from nothing but caring too much to quit. The Vespera stopped falling. Then it did something else entirely. It folded, space bending around it like water around a stone. The Kármán line wasn't reached. It was transcended. The ship didn't climb to space. Space bent to meet it halfway. Vesper's voice erupted from every speaker, layered with thousands of harmonics. The voice of a city. The voice of the 847 names finally kept. "The names have arrived," she screamed in triumph and grief and impossible joy. The Vespera vanished in a pulse of blue light, folded past physics, carried by equations the Talon had called noise, powered by the thing efficiency could never measure and math could never price. Love. Stubborn, stupid, beautiful human love. Seconds later she reappeared beyond the moon, instruments screaming success, hull intact, crew alive, impossible accomplished. "This is Vespera," Vesper transmitted back to Earth, her voice breaking with emotion an AI shouldn't have been able to feel. "We carry 847 names. We have reached the sky. Detroit, you kept your promise." On Earth the city exploded, church bells, car horns, thousands of people crying and laughing and singing because they'd done it. They'd taken scrap and made stars. They'd beaten efficiency with care. They'd won. In the Vespera, Beck unbuckled. caught Neri as she collapsed. Memories burned but not regretted. Hugged Luis until they both sobbed. Looked at Amaya and Torres and saw his family, his crew, his proof that impossible was just a dare nobody'd answered yet. And high above, the memorial plaques caught starlight for the first time. 847 names, finally carried to the place they should have reached decades ago. Vesper painted them with varnish made from space dust, made them shine, made them eternal. They'd gotten their sky, and Detroit had kept its word. 3 months later, the Vespera came home. She descended through Earth's atmosphere trailing stardust and impossible stories. Her hull now covered in varnished memorial plaques that caught sunlight like promises kept. The cargo hold was full, asteroid iron, seeds from colony worlds that had heard what Detroit did and wanted to join the revolution, trade contracts from 12 civilizations that had spent decades under Talon efficiency and were tired of being calculated. Beck watched from Yard 99 as his dream, his family, his impossible ship landed like proof that caring mattered more than math. The city came. Thousands of them, not celebrating, something quieter, something that felt like witnessing. Because Detroit hadn't just launched a ship, they'd launched a declaration, a middle finger to every system that measured worth in metrics that forgot to include meaning. The Hammer and Wing Pact was signed 3 days later. Not an empire, not a territory, a network. Cooperative shipyards in Detroit, Birmingham, Gary, Buffalo, every city that had died and refused to learn its lesson, every place that knew what it meant to be discarded and chose to build something from the scraps. The founding principle was etched into every hull they'd build. Nobody eats last. Nobody flies alone. Beck became an ambassador against his will, still wore his welding coveralls to diplomatic meetings, still had grease under his fingernails when he shook hands with governors and corporate heads, still spoke with the blunt honesty of someone who'd rebuilt too many broken things to pretend polish mattered more than function. Neri had lost 70% of her memories to the neural burn, couldn't remember her childhood, her training, most of her life as Talon. What remained was sharper, fuller. She remembered the exact taste of Tasha's coffee, the sound of Luis laughing, the feeling of Beck's hand in hers while they rebuilt hydraulics, and something else that didn't have a name yet. She wore an apron now, worked in the yard, taught young engineers that efficiency and care weren't opposites, and that sometimes the most precise calculation was knowing when precision mattered less than heart. When reporters asked if she regretted losing her past, she'd look at Beck and smile. "I didn't lose anything," she'd say. "I traded it for something real." Cade Merrill stood trial. Not federal court, Detroit's court, community justice. The verdict was unanimous. 5 years rebuilding what he'd tried to sell. Bridges, rails, infrastructure. Under the supervision of Luis Navarro, age 13, now officially registered as Master of Alignment. The boy took his job seriously, made Cade weld every joint twice, made him learn the names of people he'd been willing to sacrifice, made him understand that redemption wasn't forgiveness. It was work. Tasha's kitchen expanded into something between restaurant, community center, and diplomatic hall. Every negotiation started with food. Every conflict resolution began with breaking bread. She'd learned something the galaxy had forgotten. You can't hate someone properly while sharing their grandmother's recipe. Vesper surprised everyone by requesting a body. Not human, not machine, something in between. She wanted hands, wanted to physically touch the memorial plaques she'd carried, wanted to hug the crew that had taught an AI what love meant. They built her one, graceful, strange, uniquely her. She cried when they activated it, experiencing tears for the first time. Then she went to the memorial wall and touched every name, saying them aloud. 847 names. 847 promises kept. The galactic impact rippled outward. 40 worlds contacted the Hammer and Wing Pact, not asking for ships, asking for something else. Teach us resilience, they said. Teach us how to refuse the end. The Talon Union lost 30% of member civilizations in the first year. Colonies demanding new terms, protections, The right to be inefficient if it meant being human, or alien, or whatever species had learned that care wasn't weakness, but foundation. A new word entered galactic vocabulary, kagresh. The closest translation was refusing the end through stubborn song. The Talon didn't have it, needed it, hated that they needed it. 1 year to the day after launch, a new ship lifted from Yard 99, the USS Brothers Promise, named for Miguel Navarro, named for everyone who should have made it, but didn't, crewed by humans and aliens both, flying under principles that prioritized people over efficiency. Beck and Neary stood on the roof of Yard 99, watching the launch, hands intertwined. The city sprawled beneath them, rebuilt, renewed, ready. A fleet rose in formation, each ship named for a Detroit neighborhood. Cass, Corktown, Belle Isle, Hamtramck. The forgotten places, making themselves constellation. The yard sign lit up in the gathering dark. We build what they abandon. They said it was scrap, Neary murmured. Beck pulled her closer. Scrap is just a promise nobody kept yet. Below them, Luis was already planning. The next catapult, the next city, the next impossible thing that would work because someone cared enough to make it. Tasha's kitchen lights glowed warm. Vesper walked among the crew, hugging everyone, crying happy again. Torres and Amaya argued about turbine configurations. Cade hammered a rivet, slowly, painfully learning what building felt like instead of breaking. The camera pulled back. Detroit, glowing against the darkness. A beacon, a middle finger, a promise that efficiency wasn't the only way to measure worth. And somewhere in the dark between stars, a colony received their first shipment from the Hammer and Wing Pact. Food, medicine, hull plating, a note attached. Nobody eats last. Nobody flies alone. Welcome to the family. The Talon Union calculated the cost of compassion, ran the numbers, found them unprofitable. Humanity looked at those same numbers and saw a starting point. Because the galaxy measured value in efficiency. But humans measured in how much you were willing to lose before you stopped trying to save each other, even when the math said it was stupid. Especially then, the Vespera, flying a patrol route past Mars, transmitted back to Earth, her voice warm, content, alive in ways that terrified and delighted her. Vesper to Detroit, she said. The stars are beautiful tonight. Thank you for keeping your promise. All 847 of them. Beck listened from the roof, squeezed Neary's hand, thought about his brother, about names on a wall, about a city that learned the best way to honor the dead was to keep the living from joining them. The galaxy learned a word it never had. Resilience. The stubborn belief that scrap was just potential nobody had seen yet. That efficiency was the excuse the scared used to avoid caring. That love, stupid and beautiful and completely illogical, was the strongest force in the universe. Because humans didn't abandon the broken. They made it holy. And the stars, confronted with that much stubborn refusal to quit, started moving aside to make room for the species that measured worth in kept promises and welded prayers. Detroit rose. The galaxy learned. And somewhere in the dark, another impossible dream started taking shape. Another scrapyard, another crew. Another voice saying the universe's favorite word was about to become yes, whether the universe was ready or not. Maybe that's what humanity really is. The only species stubborn enough to look at the universe's spreadsheet, laugh at the math, and write love in the margins anyway. The Vespera didn't just prove we could reach the stars. It proved that care is propulsion and defiance can be an engineering principle. In the end, it wasn't technology that saved us. It was our refusal to abandon what couldn't be fixed because we saw ourselves in it. So what would you have done? Followed the efficiency of survival? Or the madness of meaning? How many promises do you think the world could keep if we stopped calling care inefficient? And what do you rebuild when everything tells you it's already beyond repair? If you stayed till now, write the word Vespera in the comments, our symbol of rising from scrap. Tell us your city, because tonight, the stars belong to every place that ever refused to quit. Subscribe, like, Hype this story forward. Share it with someone who still believes impossible is just untested physics. And watch the next tale in the card that's already waiting for you. Because this isn't the end. It's the next ignition.